due to insecurity of the regime, holds the greatest risk of nuclear war on Earth. He notes that the North Korean strategy is inherently unstable, explaining that aggression creates a volatile situation of cyclical provocations which will only get worse. That's why Nomura analysts 17 conclude that there is up to a 50% chance of war breaking out on the Korean Peninsula. Thus, contention 1 is security of the South. 3 missile defense systems will save lives in the event of conflict. First, Patriot. Since obtaining the Patriot in 2006, South Korea has upgraded its system numerous times. Temple 16 of White finds that Patriot missiles are now perfect after being combat tested in Saudi service. Second, Aegis. London 17 of Ohio State University writes that the U.S. Navy ships near Seoul are equipped with Aegis missile defense that can track 100 missiles simultaneously and fire interceptors to neutralize threats. Third, that is the most advanced system, as Klinger confirms its radar is 10 times more powerful than its predecessors. Thus, Vin 16 of the Carnegie Center explains that has the ability to differentiate between real and decoy warheads, which is why Stuart 17 of Georgetown University finds that has a 100% success rate. While none of these systems are perfect by themselves, when unified together they form an interoperable, multi-layered defense network. Klinger explains that multi-layered defense works by having sufficient interceptors from different batteries so that any one system's vulnerabilities are offset by the capabilities of another. Thus, Alman 38 North finds that by intercepting targets at multiple levels, multi-layered defense offers more opportunities to succeed and improves the intercept efficiency. With such interoperability, each anti-missile system can use tracking data from the others, doubling the area that can be defended and increasing the amount of missiles that can be tracked. For these reasons, a 2016 study from 38 North quantifies that with the new systems, there is a 90% chance that not a single missile lands in an attack from the north. This is critical as Dave 17 of the C. John Institute concludes that deploying missile defense will save 340,000 civilians per intercepted missile. While war is likely, it's not inevitable. Thus, contention 2 is pursuing peace. Missile defense prevents war in 2 ways. First, by deterring aggression. Sinker 17 of the University of Maryland finds that missile defense will intercept missiles, offering a protection of military assets, thereby strengthening the overall deterrence by guaranteeing a strong retaliation. Missile defense deters an attack by threatening denial. Solomon 14 of the Maritime Security Group concludes that when a defender can threaten the prevention of an initial attack, deterrence is successful 96% of the time. Second, by facilitating peace talks. Hunter Tan of Stanford University explains that North Korea views itself as a weak nation and believes it can use nuclear weapons as diplomatic leverage to strengthen its negotiating position, assure its security, and maintain stability. Yet, Lakoff 17 of Koofman University explains that in spite of anti-U.S. propaganda in the media, North Korean officials hope that one day the United States could actually become their country's partner. However, Moon 17 of Yonsei University concludes that we must face the reality that we cannot force North Korea to denuclearize in the short term. Instead, we should seek a moratorium on its nuclear program to prevent production of nuclear materials. Jackson 17 of the College of Security Studies explains that when nuclear non-proliferation is at the top of the national security priority, U.S. diplomacy is heavily constrained by the requirement that denuclearization be on the table as a part of any talks. Thus, diplomatic peace talks can only happen if the U.S. stops pushing for denuclearization. Fortunately, Saw 17 of Nanjing University observes that missile defense can help reassure the United States to pursue negotiations by encouraging the U.S. to relax its precondition, knowing that there exists a safety net should negotiations break down. This produces miscalculation, as Anderson 17 of Yale University finds that dropping denuclearization from the peace talks could lead to reduced tensions in the region by reversing the miscommunication between both sides. Thus, missile defense is a prerequisite to successful diplomacy. Overall, concludes that missile defense would enhance South Korea's protection against advanced missile-building threats, all while augmenting deterrence and improving diplomacy. Mitigating conflict is vital, as O'Connor 17 of Newsweek warns that a clash with North Korea could result in the deadliest conflict humanity has ever seen. Thus, we affirm.
Thomas and are proud to begin resolved deployment of anti-missile systems is in South Korea's best interest. Contention 1 is staying neutral. Weighing of the conversation writes that for South Korea to have any regional influence, it must remain politically neutral between the US and China so it can gain the trust of their allies in the region. Indeed, the RSIS writes that by remaining neutral, South Korea has gained significant influence by becoming a credible middleman in negotiations between US and Chinese allied nations. However, new anti-missile deployments will destroy this influence. Buckley of the New York Times 2017 writes that China opposes new missile systems on the peninsula, and South Korea's willingness to deploy the THAAD missile system has caused China to cut off diplomatic ties with Seoul. Empirically, the Japan Times in 2017 writes that just a few months ago, China canceled high-level talks with South Korea because of THAAD. Thus, Mishra of the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies concludes that THAAD's propensity to alienate China will undoubtedly destroy South Korea's influence in the region. The impact is maintaining regional cooperation. Berger of Focus Asia writes that South Korea is the only nation in Northeast Asia that is actively pushing for multilateral cooperation on policy issues. This is important for two main reasons. First, as Velasco of UCF finds the regional cooperation increases the probability of durable interstate agreements being created by 6.7 times. Progress has already been made. Lee of the Sejong Institute writes that South Korea's regional organizations have made meaningful multilateral progress on everything from disaster management to cybersecurity. This is critical as the Council on Foreign Relations writes that South Korea's foreign policy goals are rely on it being a nexus of cooperation in the region so it can get its own agenda passed. Second, increased diplomacy inherently increases communications between nations. That's critical as Stronging of Columbia explains, the misperception of an enemy threat is the primary reason nations go to war. Furthermore, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, explains in April of 2017 that there needs to be increased communication with North Korea in order to lower the risk of miscalculation and avoid military escalation in the region. Contention 2 is Kim going crazy. Just as my opponents will contend, that's powerful radar neuters North Korea's missile threat and the status quo. However, this only enrages Kim, because as the Friedman of the Stratford Institute explains, North Korea's entire calculus is based on A, being able to threaten massive destruction, and B, appearing crazy enough so adversaries will never know when North Korea will launch an attack. And the status quo that makes Kim completely predictable and takes away his threat of a tactic turn by being able to strike down current missiles, forcing him to take drastic measures. The impact is an arms race, as Melania of the New York Times explains in March of 2017. That will lead to an arms race as it will push North Korea to develop more and better missiles that can break through the missile shield. Indeed, Mola of the Space Air magazine explains that this will always happen because missiles are 50 times cheaper to proliferate than the advancement needed to produce interceptors. Problematically, Gilbert of the University of Kentucky finds that arms races increase the chance of armed dispute by 400%. This is because, as Jackson of Stanford explains, after such as North Korea will attack preemptively, even when sure that the outcome will be worse than avoiding war, because they perceive attacking first as preferable to being attacked. Attack comes in two forms. First is artillery. Empirically, North Korea has used its artillery to retain its deterrence. As Cronin of CNN reports in 2010, North Korea launched 2 unprovoked artillery strikes against the island of Dumping and South Korean naval vessel in order to remain predictable in its unpredictability. The International Criminal Court finds that these attacks killed or wounded over 100 people. As Sung Kien of Xinhua explains in 2016, that is only meant to track missiles at an altitude of 40 to 150 kilometers. However, most of North Korea's artillery flies at less than 20 and are capable of striking Seoul within a minute. Problematically, King of Foreign Policy finds that North Korea can fire 500,000 rounds within the first hour of conflict. Even if a missile defense system is 100% functional, artillery alone will single-handedly destroy Seoul and its millions of inhabitants. Second is chemical weapons. As the International Crisis Group explains, current North Korean doctrine states that every third artillery round fired will be a chemical round. Indeed, South Korea's own government estimates that the North has up to 5,000 tons of chemical agents stockpiled. Critically, Kirby, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, finds in June of 2017 that due to the spreading effects of chemical attacks, even if South Korea could strike down every single one of North Korea's artillery, the attack will still affect up to 4 million people. Save these lives, please engage. Thank you.
Are you guys ready?
So good.
No. Yeah, we are.
Mutual assured destruction.
Can I just use the last part, like 4 million people still
Yeah.
threatened to go down?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like we have it, and then like it's just going to take forever.
Yeah, for sure.
So he's just gonna.
It shows my after crossfire.
If it loads, we're just gonna try and pull up a hotspot right now, and then see if that will stop.
Drive doesn't seem to be working too well on this.
Yeah.
I think
Why
all
visitors?
Google system, like Google Drive, Gmail,
Yeah.
Google
Yeah,
is all
like
work.
all of
So
them.
I like if you're trying to pull it off on Drive, unless you have a hotspot, it's not gonna work on this
Yeah,
Wi-Fi.
Okay, we're trying to right now.
The signal's not too great here either.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, we got it. Sorry about that. And do you want to be using that cross or do you want to?
I'm just, it'll take a few seconds.
So just start that.
Would you highlight, can you highlight it?
It's the daily one, and I can highlight the.
I just wanna see where it says that like a nutritional formula equally restructured.
We said
We didn't say
effect.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine. Just look at it.
That's like 8 seconds.
Yeah, is everyone ready? Okay.
So on your second contention about Kim going crazy, like
Yeah.
can you quantify how much more Kim Jong-un becomes enraged by most defense systems?
Okay, so what we're saying right now is in the beginning, Kim has no reason to attack because he has
No
his two
reason.
pillars of calculus. Yeah. So he already has his two pillars of calculus. Once you take those out with that, he needs to be able to remain unpredictable to gain the political concessions that he needs to keep his regime in power, and thus he's going to do some things to remain unpredictable, which he has done already, such as bomb like South Korean islands or naval.
So you
vessels.
guys are predicting that he's going to be unpredictable.
Yeah. I mean, we're saying that he needs to do that for him to like keep his regime alive.
Okay.
That's the question.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, so you say in your first contention, or I guess in like your overview, that North Korea might attack South Korea. Am I getting that right? Like that's how you're linking
Well, no,
things in?
like the first card that we read, or like one of the second card that we read says that there's a 50% probability for in the region.
Okay,
Which,
can you
I don't know if she's
explain
gonna start
to-
that, but there's like.
can you explain to me like why that's ever gonna happen instead of just like giving me a
Yeah, so
simple
it's
set
not
of
gonna be like North Korea's gonna like go and just attack South Korea one day, although I don't know what Kim Jong-un is, like you said. But what we're saying is that there's a chance of miscalculation. There's two reasons why there could be a war. The first is that North Korea is an unstable regime. So like we don't know like what their actions are. But secondly,
as you
what
mentioned
happens
before,
is miscalculation. Like one day North Korea fires a test missile, maybe South Korea thinks it's a real missile. There you go. It started
So
with
those are
war.
your two
The
things.
chances are 50%.
So those are the two things. North Korea might go crazy and attack South Korea, and miscalculation, correct?
Yeah.
Just want to clarify that. Okay,
Yes.
okay, do you have a question?
Sure. Let's talk about your first contention about like regional stability and like how South Korea must remain neutral. So what is the biggest threat to South Korea right now?
I would argue probably diplomacy in the region because there's absolutely no threat of North Korea bombing.
So you don't think it's like the fact that North Korea has like is capable like has been tested missiles? You
Well,
don't
let's
think
ask
that-
you
so
this:
the
do you think
possibility
North
for-
Korea is ever going to attack South Korea first?
There's a probability. Like it's
Why?
not like maybe not.
If
first,
they
but
ever
something
attack
that
South
North
Korea, you know you realize that they're gonna lose, and they know that they're gonna lose.
Yeah, that's why I tell
And then you
there's
gave
two
us the
other
two
why-
reasons. No, you didn't give us two
Yeah.
other reasons. You gave us 2 reasons. Kim Jong-un might just want to attack, and one is miscalculation.
Okay,
Miscalculation we solved for in
miscalculation.
our first contention, and
How
then
do
the
you solve for that?
we told you, because we are getting rid of that, we actually bring the possibility of diplomatic actions
With
occurring.
whom?
China, North Korea, their allies.
Okay, so we get rid of that and like all of a sudden North Korea wants to be friends with
No,
us.
we're not saying that we get rid of that and they're going to be friends. We're saying if you put in that, it's going to get worse. Because as we showed in the past, because that was in place, China decided to come out of negotiations, and they specifically
Okay, first
stated
of all,
that
I was
as
gonna
a
tell you
region.
that that's not true, that was because of some kind of Chinese government like ceremony. But secondly, we would contend that the best way to reach North Korea is to take away the one thing that threatens them the most.
Again, the
us
2
trying to
pillars
take
of
away their
calculus.
us trying to take away their nuclear weapons, which is something we don't have to do in the world of ballistic missiles.
We'll take some prep. Okay. So it's a minute 30 use. Sorry. I just hit a piece of this. So that's like 6 seconds. So that way, it's 2 minutes, 22 seconds. So just leave it out. With that, let's begin in their contention one about staying neutral. 3 overall responses. The first of which is that South Korea, for their entire history, has not remained neutral. It's very clear that they've been a U.S. partner for their entire history, and it doesn't make sense that missile defense right now uniquely makes this shift. In fact, we've had missile defense in South Korea to varying degrees for a long time now, and yet diplomacy has still been working, even in the world in which they say it should not be working. So there's no probability that what they say actually happens in the real world. But then the second response is in direct response to their China argument, in which they say that China opposes missile defense. The problem is that this is just political posturing because China desires increased hegemony in the region. They're just using missile defense as a scapegoat. But foreign policy explains in 2017 said there are 3 other missile defense launchers from in terms of THAAD deployments in Asia, and Japan missile defense can already see into China. But ultimately what we saw is that retaliation from China against those missile defense systems were very short term, which is why Mannheim and Georgetown University in 2017 explains is that in the long term, right after the short term, China will just get over it, so there's no long-term harm. They talk about this whole idea about how China canceled this diplomatic talk, but China didn't cancel that because of that. It was because of some congressional ceremony that happened to be happening at the same time. But let's go to the impact level. You can actually turn the argument against them because of trilateral relations. What Chum of the East Asian Institute in 2015 explains is that implementing missile defense right now with THAAD is a critical litmus test for declaring that South Korea is determined to maintain the South Korean alliance, or the trilateral alliance between South Korea, Japan, and the United States. This means that if we don't implement that and we remove all missile defense, that will destroy this trilateral alliance. And the reason why that's really important is because that erodes all of the multilateralism that they talk about, and what Pinkston of the national interest explains is that you always prefer multilateralism with the United States and Japan insofar as that we actually care about South Korea, whereas China will only ram them over to maintain their hegemonic ambitions. But let's go on to their second contention, which is obviously what they're going for, about Kim becoming crazy. There's 3 overall responses. The first push is that they say that Kim Jong-un wants to become unpredictable. But per their own logic, Kim Jong-un does not want the United States or South Korea to attack, which means that they really want to become unpredictable because they know that that would increase the risk of miscalculation on the part of South Korea and the United States. That would increase the risk of a preemptive strike, which is obviously something that they want to avoid, so it doesn't make sense they would want to be unpredictable. In fact, what I would contend is that they are aggressing because we want to denuclearize North Korea, and so they're using that as a deterrence factor. But according to Saw from our second contention, when we were creating a safety net over South Korea, we removed the denuclearization precondition, which is successful aid for negotiations, which solves back for this entire contention. But then secondly, it's a unique reason why we need to do this now and why it will work right now, whereas they don't actually solve any of the issues. But on this whole idea that Kim Jong-un is going to increase militarization, what men in Columbia University in 2017 explains is that an increase in spending won't solve anything for 2 reasons. First of all, is that they have really old technology and really old development, like they just developed ICBMs, they're 10, 20 years behind the curve. But then secondly, is that spending is oversaturated right now, they can't increase spending anymore because they're an impoverished country. But the third response is that just removing missile defense won't solve anything, because according to Anderson from Case, basically, even if the United States was initially responsible for increasing North Korean aggression, they now have other justifications for using aggression, which means that removing won't actually solve the issue. Then in this idea of artillery, basically, there's a few reasons why North Korea would never use artillery. But Stratford 2017 explains is that first of all, they wouldn't want their artillery to get knocked out early because North Korea has painstakingly built up their artillery as a primary defense capability for their country, and using artillery to attack South Korea would immediately open them up to significant counter-battery fire, which would destroy most of their artillery forces very early on in a war, which are key to deterrence in an invasion. But then it also has extreme failure rates, it's a slow rate of fire, and most of South Korea is out of range. But then ultimately, this just justifies more missile defense with Goalkeeper and Iron Dome that protect against artillery. But then they talk about how they can kill 4 million people with a chemical round, but that is assuming, per their own evidence, that we do not stop the missiles, which we do 90% of the time.
Okay, can I see the evidence that says that you saw artillery 90% of the time?
No, it's just that's just multi-layer defense.
So
You want to see element?
It's just element?
Yeah, it's
okay,
just
that's fine. Okay, then see it.
Like if you want to see
That's fine.
I
Okay, we're gonna start now. That's 1 minute. Okay, so this roll is going to be kind of weird, so it warrants a roadmap. It's going to start with 2 overviews that you can flow on their side of the flow, and then we're just going to be going down the case back to ours. Okay. Is everybody ready? Okay, starting with the first overview on uniqueness. My opponents never prove uniqueness, recognize that their only link into a conflict is that North Korea is testing missiles. However, North Korea has always been proliferating weapons, but they don't explain why North Korea is uniquely increasing tensions right now compared to before. Indeed, Cloud of the LA Times in July 2017 writes that Secretary of Defense Mattis himself explains that North Korea's new upgraded ICBMs do not bring the United States closer to starting a war, as the United States has had self-restraint and continues to pursue diplomacy. Empirically, Falk of CBS in July 2017 explains that following the North Korea's recent test of an ICBM that could reach New York, the U.S. is pursuing passive coercive measures such as sanctions and travel restrictions, not actual hard power. Then a second overview. Recognize that North Korea will never actually start a war until that is in place. First, Jackson's national interest explains that North Korea will never start a war, and after examining 60 years of its foreign policy, finds that throughout history, North Korea has had countless opportunities to escalate conflicts, but has always showed restraint because their top priority is regime survival, and they are not suicidal. Second, Robert Collins of the Korea Institute writes that North Korea uses exaggerated military threats to try and win concessions, not to actually incite a war. Third, rather what we explain is that North Korea will only attack after that is in place, because Friedman of the Stratford Institute finds that North Korea deters other countries from intervening with its perceived reckless action. However, that makes North Korea completely predictable, which means Kim has to take even more drastic action to regain its unpredictability, like bombing a South Korean island like he's done in the past. Then onto their actual case. First on security, they only have 2 links in this. First is Kim calculus, but literally just multiply what I told you in the second overview. Kim is going to only attack when that is in place. Second, they talk about miscalculation. However, 2 responses. First, we solve back for this with our first contention, where we explain that we increase communication, increase diplomacy, and we decrease the chance of miscalculation. And second, we would argue that miscalculation increases, the chance of miscalculation increases in their world when tensions are higher, because that enrages Kim. That means that miscalculation is more likely to happen. Then onto their second contention. Their first warrant is about deterrence. 4 responses here. First, Bob, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, explains that our adversaries are not deterred by missile defense systems, but rather by the threat of nuclear retaliation that lies behind them, which means that the systems themselves are useless. It's not a reason to affirm. Second, deterrence doesn't even work. Freeman of Stanford explains that deterrence is only successful 3% of the time, and the likelihood of deterrence with North Korea plummets because, as Crothwell of the Chicago Tribune writes in April 2017, that North Korea is immune to deterrence for 2 reasons. First, it's extremely isolated, and second, its behavior is extremely erratic. Then finally, their argument relies on the idea that there is something to deter in the first place. However, classify the second overview, where I explain that North Korea will never attack until that is in place. Then onto their second warrant about facilitating peace through the United States. First, recognize that THAAD was already deployed over a week ago, but on Monday, the United States voted to increase United Nations sanctions, which means that they're still pursuing diplomacy. It doesn't matter, they're still trying to pursue denuclearization, and that my opponents don't actually provide a probability of the United States saying we're just gonna let North Korea have nukes. That literally makes no sense. And second, they don't provide a time frame for solvency of this diplomacy. It's been 60 years, we haven't been able to solve a conflict. It could easily just be 60 more. Then onto the United States diplomacy itself. First, diplomacy fails. Burma of the Atlantic in 2017 writes that every U.S. diplomat ever since 1994 has failed to make a tangible change in North Korea's government. He furthers that U.S. diplomacy decreases the chance of future negotiations by consolidating the North Korean people's fear of the United States and increasing nationalism. Then come back to our side of the flow. We're going to frontline quickly here. First, group all my opponent's responses. He just talks about the probability of diplomacy. It's not actually going to happen. China doesn't care. However, recognize that sure, China may have to cancel one talk because of a congressional ceremony. However, what we point to is a different instance where they literally canceled it because of THAAD. Then on trilateral relations, turn his turn. Schaff of the Carnegie Endowment writes that South Korea-Japanese relations are at their worst when their perceived strategic need for each other wanes. That deployment causes South Korea to think that it does not need to rely on Japan for its security, and thus creates no incentive for cooperation. Then you see miscalculation increasing because South Korea and Japan are actually communicating each other. That's a functional reason to vote for us. Good? Yeah.
Charter.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Did everyone ready?
Okay, so you say saying the U.S. is pursuing coercion and not hard power.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And,
when is that hard from? Like not 2017, but
July.
July.
And we
What
can
happened
see
in
it, wait,
August?
we can see it in August. Actually, we can see it in September as well, literally this Monday, when the United States voted to approve UN sanctions versus trying to say all right, North Korea, we're going to attack you, and that's the solvency. Now, can I ask you a
Well,
question?
hold on. Has Trump not said that, on countless occasions, about wanting to attack with fire and
I mean,
fury?
sure, he can say that all he wants, but if we look at what the United States is actually doing in terms of its foreign policy, it's still pursuing these sanctions and passive forms of measures. Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so on our second contention, you basically say a bunch of reasons why, this isn't probable, Kim's not going to attack, etc., etc.
With artillery.
Okay, we can get to that. Alright, so would you concede that you only respond to the arms race part of it versus the other 2 internal links?
What are the other 2 internal links? And I can answer your question. question.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just gonna take a brief moment to explain it and.
Just
yeah.
can you like name
Yeah,
the facts?
okay, so first is Freeman, the Stratford Institute, that's the two pillars.
No, that's my first
Okay, wait,
response.
and then second, or you just say Kim's predictable, it doesn't
No,
actually
I said he
interact
doesn't
with
want to
the
act
argument.
unpredictably because that would increase the risk of
Well,
miscalculation.
That's
in
not
the
really
US
true.
first
He
strike.
literally, like in the past, we have historical precedent. He literally bombed the South Korean island with
I know,
artillery.
and that was
with
an artillery test. I know what your
It wasn't
American
an
author
artillery
thinks
test.
he knows, but
Okay,
a
so
lot
wait,
of Asian literature.
so you're saying that we should trust oh, wait, you actually really cite Asian literature. You just randomly assert this. So we should
I
trust
don't
you
wanna
as a
have a
high
debate
schooler versus like the guy that's getting that's his job to actually analyze North Korea.
I guess I was in South Korea this summer and there's a risk of miscalculation. I don't
Yeah,
have
okay,
to be
that's
sources of
great
evidence.
All right,
I
so
think we should have
okay,
a
what
debate
about the third internal link, which is that Jackson of Stanford explains that actors like North Korea would rather attack first than be attacked.
I mean, that is the. Wait, then that implicitly concedes the fact that there is always a risk of conflict, especially because there is an arms race right now. That takes out literally your first two observations.
Not really, because we
It really does.
No, we explained that.
Okay, is there not an arms
that's in
race going on
conjunction
right
with.
now?
Can you give me a second? That's in conjunction with Friedman. So we explained once you take away those pillars of calculus, that's when they want to attack.
Oh, so they're all woven together into one link chain. They're separate.
I mean, they
They're all
can function.
dependent on one another. So
No,
I'm
they
explaining
can-
the
they can
Freeman,
function
you lose
on
the
their
entire
own.
link chain.
Not really. They're pretty functional on their own. But you don't really respond to Friedman. Again, you just randomly
do.
you just assert that Kim doesn't want to act
And
on
I have a logical warrant behind it.
Yeah,
that
but
can
we
talk
actually
about
have
later.
the logical warrant and the historical precedent
The
with
logical
North
warrant
Korea
doesn't make
attacking.
sense.
I mean, it
Like,
really does. Wait, so can I explain
Kim
why it
conducted
makes
a
sense?
missile test on a
Wait.
South Korean
Can I
island.
explain?
It doesn't
Can I explain why it
make
makes sense? Can I explain why it
No,
makes sense?
because you've done that in your
I can't.
speeches.
No,
I'd
okay.
like to ask a question.
Oh, wait, but I never
This
really
is
get a
the
chance to
process.
respond to you.
Fine.
Okay, so yeah, you say it doesn't make sense, but it really does because Kim's pillars of calculus prevent other countries from intervening because they see, oh, well, this guy's kind of crazy, we probably shouldn't intervene there.
If anything, insecurity increases the risk of a first strike to take him out.
Are you saying from?
Yeah. So that was 1 minute 17 seconds, and you just a minute 35.
We have 1 minute and 5.
Actually, if you
Those 8 more sentences.
so just have a minute.
So, our case studies. Is everyone ready? Okay. Let's start off with their Friedman overview in which they say that Kim Jong-un is completely unpredictable. The main problem I have with this is that for some reason, right now, Kim Jong wants regime success, but when that is played, that's when he goes completely crazy and starts attacking South Korea, which basically guarantees the obliteration of North Korea. What Kelly at Busan University tells you is that actually what leads to more rampant conflict is insecurity, and insecurity exists in a world where there is no ballistic missile defense, especially on the part of South Korea. But remember, what Alan tells you in the last crossfire and in his rebuttal is that North Korea does not want to become unpredictable because it means that the regime will collapse, and that is their biggest motive for continuing everything they're doing. With that, let's go into our first contention about securing the South. All they say is that they solve this through an increase in communication and and we show we actually link into an increase in miscal. What they don't show you is that the threat actually any threat actually goes away in their world. They don't actually show that there's communication with North Korea either, so they don't really link into a solvency here. But the main place where you can clearly vote for us is off of peace talks. Why diplomacy fails and what they've been saying is because we keep pushing for denuclearization. The only way we can take that off the table, and this is very clearly said in the SAW card, is when you actually have missile defense. That allows there to be a safety net. We don't have to push for denuclearization. We can push for a moratorium instead. When that happens, North Korea stops feeling threatened because nukes are their only way of having power in the region. They don't have to posture anymore, and they can cooperate with the United States. And it provides even if peace talks aren't immediately successful, it provides a line of communication between North Korea and the United States and South Korea directly, which means that there's a decreased risk of miscalculation. But then let's move on to their side of the flow, in which first they talk about China being threatened by THAAD. The problem is here that China's threatened by everything. They just look for a scapegoat to be aggressive. And secondly, about the trilateral turn that they put on our case, there's no reason why miscalculation between Japan and South Korea could be an issue. There's not going to be a war then.
We're gonna wrap up, sorry.
respond to the overview real quick. Go down the other side as well. So if the judge already comments and thumbs. Okay. First of all, I'd like to point out that in their overview, all they really tell us is that Kim doesn't want to be unpredictable, which I'll go on to later, which first of all doesn't really make sense. Second of all, they only give us an assertion and doesn't really give any reason for us to believe that. Next, let's go on to their first contention. Their real motive here is diplomacy, where they say, give us a missile defense system and let them have their nuclear power. However, this has two things that they actually concede to. First is that 90% of missiles are struck down, which shows that 10% of the missiles still can go through, and they never show that it's actually artillery, and then they agree that North Korea won't attack first. Thus, they are solving for 90% of an issue that whereas we can show they aren't going to be sending nukes in the first place, so once again, flow that to our side. The second thing that they concede is that nukes are their only regional power, which specifically links back to our second contention, which I'd like to extend upon here. Let me point out once again that Friedman shows that Kim has two pillars to his calculus. They say this doesn't make sense. Let me explain this a bit more. As they mentioned before, Kim needs to have political concessions from other people. He doesn't want other people coming in, and his only bargaining chip right now is the nuclear power that they have specifically stated themselves in their summary. However, they need these two pillars of calculus, which is having enough firepower to decimate South Korea's military capabilities, because if they don't, South Korea will retaliate, the United States will retaliate, and their regime will fall. Their second is being perceived as unpredictable enough to actually attack, because as they say, if that is in place and none of the nuclear weapons will be able to penetrate through, that North Korea has absolutely no bargaining chip left. Thus, they have to do something else. Thus, although we do agree that THAAD works, this doesn't actually solve for the issue, and taking away both pillars forces Kim to take drastic action to regain predictability through preemptive strikes, which we've shown has happened in the past. Thus, these are going to lead to two attacks such as artillery and chemical warfare, which we have shown that this is problematic because came a foreign policy that North Korea can launch 500,000 rounds of artillery to South Korea in the first hour, killing millions. And most importantly, the chemical weapons, as International Crisis Group explains, North Korea has a doctrine saying that every third round of artillery will be a chemical weapon. They specifically stated that. So thus, all of their attacks will have a chemical backlash, and our card shows that 2.5 million will be killed and 4 million will be affected. Thank you.
You guys all good for Graham? Okay, so here's my first question.
Yeah, so is there like zero risk of conflict if you go caught? Absolutely zero risk.
Well, I mean, no one can make guarantees in this round, but we can guarantee you that we're going to significantly reduce the chance of conflict.
I know, but there's still a risk of conflict.
Wait, no.
I'd say that for the past 60 years, where Kim hasn't actually
You just say
escalated,
yes or no. Like,
hasn't actually escalated the conflict to the point of war, we can probably
Wait, so if the
ascertain.
Is there
past
a
17
risk,
years
even if
I
it's just
haven't gone to
1%?
college, does that
It's
mean
probably
there's
way less than
0%
1%. It's
chance
probably
of
closer to 0 than
Yeah, it's
anything.
closer to
And
zero,
I
but
think a better
the issue
question
here
is
is that
that
like North Korea hasn't attacked for the hasn't escalated to war for the past 60 years because they've had their strategic deterrent. But we see that goes away in your world, which is why conflict is more likely. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so again on this this idea about denuclearization. So if the United States really wanted to pursue denuclearization, why are we still sanctioning North Korea to denuclearize?
Well, foreign policy doesn't happen overnight. This is something that Ahana stated in summary. Obviously, we just implemented, deployed THAAD last week, and then, at the same week, we had sanctions. Obviously, it's not like a 1-to-1 ratio, but, we can pretty guarantee that once we have the multi-layered system.
If the United States actually wanted to, let them keep their nuclear weapons, then they could just postpone the vote on the United States sanctions, or they could have voted no, any number of
Again,
things.
it doesn't
One
happen
example
overnight.
of
from
United
happening,
States
but they
sanctions
still
proves our
want
entire
they still want
analysis.
North Korea to denuclearize,
That doesn't-
which is why they approved the sanctions.
That doesn't really, but first of all, no, that's not why they approved the sanctions. That was in response to a nuclear test. But then,
So wait, you're saying it's in response to a nuclear test, but then you also say the United States wants them to denuclearize.
no,
So
we
which
say
one
that
is it?
we say that in a world in which we have missile defense, the U.S. no longer needs them to have
Well, we
denuclearized.
do
Because
have
what you can
missile
see
defense right
is that
now.
missile defense works, and that
But we
provides
have-
a
but we
blanket
just
No,
say
but
there's
that
that
was deployed
last week.
before the sanctions were voted on.
It was on the same week.
Yeah, but we
Foreign policy does not
just
have
think
to
about
go-
Yeah,
just
but
think about
The
it.
government is
They
not
could
an
have-
efficient
They
system.
could have postponed it.
Wait. So it took
them
them 3 days to tell people at the UN that.
I mean,
yo,
there are a
hey,
lot of
yeah,
possibilities. I'm just saying that foreign policy does not
Yeah,
happen
but I'm saying
overnight
they
to the
could've-
degree of
yeah, they
changing
could've
our
gone-
entire policy
They could have
stance.
gotten
I would
much more
say
time by
maybe
postponing the vote, but they decide, no, we're gonna vote yes.
Maybe
We
if we-
want to sanction North Korea.
Maybe if we debate each other at Bronx in a month, you can be making that argument because it's been over a month, but it's been a few days.
Yeah, but I'm
so
saying
I would
the
say give it a little bit more
possibility
time.
of like this time frame occurring could have still happened if the United States actually wanted North Korea to denuclearize. They could have postponed the vote. They could have rejected the vote.
So
It doesn't
that
matter, but
one
they
example
still
just proves our
voted
entire
yes.
part of
All
the
we're
analysis.
trying to say is if that was on their mind,
They would have
implementing
done it
that
already.
would have changed it,
I
yes.
don't know how you can assert that because you're not the US government and don't have access to.
Yeah, neither are you. That's why you can't assert that they are
Okay, but
going
there's
to
still a
let
chance that
North
they
Korea keep their nukes.
That's time, we'll take a remaining minute. So I know that the flows are pretty messy in this one debate. I'm gonna try and front line as best as I can. Start in like the overviews, where you flow them, and then like their overviews, and then like our response to it. And then I'll go on to their case, and then our case. Okay? Their overviews basically make this idea that North Korea will never attack, but that doesn't mean that conflict is unlikely. They completely dropped the Kelly of Pusan University evidence that says that insecurity without missile defense will likely increase the rate of a South Korean preemptive strike against North Korea because of the fact that they don't feel safe. The uniqueness, as Ahana explains in summary, is the fact that North Korea is becoming more aggressive and just got nuclear capabilities for a missile right now. That means that even if North Korea doesn't want to attack, South Korea could. But then they say that North Korea wants to be unpredictable, and then that's why THAAD becomes more aggressive, but they completely misunderstand our response. We say that per their own logic, North Korea doesn't want to be unpredictable because that would increase the risk of a first strike, so they want to be more, like they don't want that to happen. But let's go on to their case, their second contention. They try to extend this like offense about artillery and chemical weapons, but they extend through a lot of defense. First of all, is that they extend through Stratford, who explains that North Korea will never use artillery in an attack because of high failure rates, because they don't want to get out early, because like attacking with artillery in a preemptive strike would reveal all their positions. It would also, they have very slow rates of fire, and they don't even have the range to attack South Korea. That means that ultimately their chemical round scenario, their chemical weapons scenario can't happen because it happens through artillery, but if they aren't firing artillery, there's not going to be any risk of chemical weapons. But they also don't respond to the Anderson card that says that they're still being aggressive in the status quo. There is still an arms race in the status quo. That's why they implicitly concede that there is always a risk of conflict, because North Korea will always have the risk of attacking preemptively per their own logic. That's why you can go back to our case, and this is why we're winning the round. At least we actually have a risk of solving the conflict. Even if the conflict is so small in probability, the event is so severe, it would cause the deadliest conflict on Earth. They concede THAAD works. At the very least, you can vote on the fact that we're saving lives, because if there is a conflict, we can prevent that. But we prevent the conflict from happening because of the fact that, according to SAW, missile defense leads to a safety net, which leads to us dropping denuclearization as a precondition, which leads to us decreasing decreasing the nuclear threat and decreasing miscalculation, because now we're talking with North Korea. We say that because North Korea knows the tensions are high, if they're losing, they would want to go to negotiations, and the US wants this as well, even if it's not immediate. Thank you.
Yeah, we're just kind of about to ask about that. It's just going to be, overviews, their case, our case. Starting first on insecurity, first they try to extend this new impact about South Korea attacking first. However, first, they don't actually terminalize this. There's no way to even vote off it. And second, look to the fact that on our overviews, we literally explain that North Korea will never attack until we put in that, which means that South Korea won't feel insecure because they know that North Korea is only making these threats for political concessions. Then second, on the likelihood of North Korea actually attacking, they just randomly assert that North Korea doesn't want to be unpredictable, but we actually give you the Friedman analysis, which explains that North Korea wants to be unpredictable because that's how they stop other countries from intervening with their actions. Then quickly down their case. Their first contention about security, extend what Lucas tells you in summary, where they say, oh, well, then we can strike down 90% of missiles. But the issue is they're creating their own problem that they can't actually solve for. In the calm world, we're not even having a probability of conflict. They're saying, well, like, even if conflict occurs, we can solve for like 90% of it. But the issue is we prevent conflict in the first place, which solves for their entire impact. Then second on this idea of denuclearization, you're going to outweigh here because he never responds to the analysis like given rebuttal, which is A, there's zero probability of this actually occurring. The United States has never said that they want North Korea to keep its nukes. Second, they give no time frame for this solvency. It's been 60 years since the conflict started. It could easily take another 60 more. Allah never explains when we're actually going to solve this conflict. Then come back to our side of the flow, on to our second contention. He says we extend through ink, but the issue is that his responses aren't actually going to interact with our analysis. We explain. Friedman gives you two pillars of Kim's calculus. First is having enough firepower to decimate Seoul. Second is being perceived as unpredictable enough to actually use it. When this threat is taken away by THAAD, because THAAD can look into North Korea, making them completely predictable and striking down missiles, which means that North Korea doesn't actually have the firepower, then they have to regain their unpredictability by taking drastic actions such as bombing a South Korean island. Allen says that we're never going to use artillery. The issue is in 2010, they literally bombed the South Korean island with artillery. This is historical precedent. We're giving you probability there. Then he says that, oh, well, like, North Korea, like, the artillery isn't effective. First of all, it doesn't matter. Like, we explained that it can't actually strike South Korea. They came up foreign policy explains that they can launch 500,000 rounds of artillery within the first hour. And second, even as South Korea could strike down every single piece of artillery, we explained that because chemical agents spread, 4 million people would still be affected. Thus, we urge you to negate.